Athletes, take your mark, get set. It's time for the Addict II Athlete podcast. Hey, everybody out there, Coach Blu Robinson here. Hey, thank you so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And if you would be so inclined to jump on and give us a review, it does help Team Addict II Athletes podcast get out there to the ears of those who might need it. Beyond that, of you being able to share it. So thank you so much. Athletes, please turn your attention to our website, addict2athlete.org. You'll find awesome content. You'll find all of our archived podcasts. But more so, you'll see our calendar of events. We've got a lot of events coming up specifically this year as Addict II Athlete turns 10 years old. We got some neat things planned for the team and for our communities to get into that recovery mindset and to help anyone struggling with addiction. I also want to thank our Patreon subscribers. You guys are the backbone of Team Addict II Athlete, so thank you so much, Patreon subscribers. We really do appreciate all that you do. Athletes, I've got a great guest today, someone that, again, I found, lo and behold, on the old TikTok app and then on YouTube. And as you guys have heard, we did a podcast with Dr. B a month or two ago. And one day I tuned in and I saw our guest speaker on there today. And I'm like, I like this guy's style. We actually got to meet him at the beginning of April when we went down to check out Huntington Beach area. Parham, I'm going to mess up your last name again, brother.
Parham Nimatola. Happy to be here.
Parham Nimatola. It's so good to have you here, man. Down there in God's country, I think, Southern California, Huntington Beach area. Parham, thanks so much for being part of this, man. Like I said, when I saw you and Dr. B together and just the content you guys were creating on the Dr. B's Addiction Recovery YouTube channel, I knew that we needed to touch base. I didn't know that you were in Southern California until we were heading down there. I'm like, Marissa, we're heading down there. Let's just jump in and say hi. But I really want to share Addict II Athlete's message with you and you with the team. And so, Parham, can you talk a little bit about you, about your history, about how I loved it when we went and toured your facility and you talked about basketball and you stepping into that realm of a coach that kind of put you in the mindset of maybe I have talent and maybe I have some things I can do outside of addiction as I'm in this recovery mindset, because your story, I think, speaks volumes to where our athletes are as they move from addict to athlete into professional or mother or father or to build on that. Welcome to the podcast. Would you mind sharing us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to the opportunity to sit down with you and everybody listening to be a part of this, because Coach Blu, I really do respect what you and Marissa are doing. I truly mean that sincerely from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
The fact that you guys are helping a recovery community that is underserved and with lack of resources and providing something that's community-based, all-inclusive, and in line with what I have a passion for, which is health and fitness and sports, specifically, is something really beautiful. So before I get into where I am right now, let me tell you how the story got here real quick, if you will, because I think for anyone listening that struggled with addictions, hopefully my story has a little bit of hope rooted in it. So first and foremost, I am an addictions counselor, so I want to preface that. And I also do have a master's in marriage and family therapy. So I do have some professional training. However, on a personal level, June 13th, 2008 is going to be my 13-year sobriety date. So 13 years clean and sober on June 13th, something I'm definitely proud of. And the journey to get there wasn't that easy, as many people understand and know. I was born in the country of Iran. And this is Iran post-war, so it's not the Iran, pre-war and pre-revolution and stuff that people have a reflection of. It's like what you see in the news. It's like you don't really want to be living there. I was born in that country, and fortunately, my family was able to immigrate to the United States, and I really started to put my feet in here and grow some roots, and started to identify as being an American kid. AYSO soccer, Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, I was living the dream. And when I was 9 years old, my family got up and moved back to Iran, and I was actually there until I was 16 years old. So there was a lot of moving back and forth. And the reason I share that is because if anybody's moved state to state or, hometown to hometown, you know how uncomfortable it is to adjust as a child. Yeah. And to go country to country for me was a big deal, because I went from being smart to stupid overnight because I couldn't read and write the language. So for a couple of years, I sat inside the classroom, unable to read, unable to write, getting picked on, bullied, and all that world that comes with the cruelty of kids. And eventually when I was 16, 17 years old, and this is really going to tie into sports and the impact that it had in my life, I finally moved back to the United States, to the same high school that I coach at today. And it was, halfway through my junior year. Now I just moved from Iran. Now I'm a foreign kid, the opposite version of it.
Yep.
And I had a lot of adolescent acne. I was really awkward. I was timid. I was shy. And thank God for the basketball team of the school.
Right.
I found a home. I found a place. I found a belonging, a sense of unity, brotherhood. And at this point, also, I did have an addiction that was brewing. So, marijuana was my first kind of drug of choice, if you want. And for me at that time, it did something magical for me, Coach Blue. I was experiencing so much debilitating anxiety and fear and just low self-esteem that when I would smoke,
Yeah.
it actually helped alleviate all that for me because I didn't know how else to let go of it. I didn't know how to process. I couldn't talk to my family about it because it was, you're not supposed to. I couldn't talk to society about it because you weren't supposed to. And
Yeah.
I've even gone as far as saying there was times that marijuana helped me save me from myself. My depression was
Yes.
very severe. My depression was at the level of like self-harm severe, and and from there, my addiction, as we all know, is progressive. As addictions counselor, I could verify that addictions are progressive, my friends. There was a couple of events that happened in my life. For example, my mom getting really sick, losing a significant relationship due to like infidelity and stuff like that. Just little things, fuel
Yeah.
on the fire that kept
Yes.
brewing my addiction, brewing my addiction, brewing my addiction. I'm going to fast forward it to the end because this is where sports becomes the most valuable thing in my recovery that I want to share with your community. I got to the point I was about 25 years old, disconnected from my family, disconnected from myself. I was binging on hard drugs. I was going in and out of detox centers. Safe to say that athleticism in sports was completely in the rearview mirror.
Way far away. Yeah.
Way far away, Coach. And I finally hit my bottom, which is something that we could talk about, and my family hit their bottom, which is something we definitely need to talk about. And
Right.
because it's not just the individual that hits bottom, the family has to hit bottom if we're talking about family support and family healing and recovery, because it needs both.
True.
And I eventually, went to a rehab that stuck. This is June 13th, 2008. And 30 days into this, so this is the part that I really want to share. 30 days into being sober, I said, you know what? I got to go do something because I just can't sit on my hands and sit inside these rehabs and, not do anything. So I go back to my old high school basketball coach. His name is Coach Keith Barnett. And I walk up to Coach Barnett and I say, hey, Coach, I'm really struggling in life. I've dropped out of school. I've dropped out of life. I'm really caught up. Can I just come to your gym? And he was my varsity coach, so he remembered me. I said, can I just come to your gym and just sweep the floors, brother? Can I just come and just be a part of the team? Can I just be a part of the community? And he said, sure, man. I'll do anything to help. A few days after that, the head freshman basketball coach wanted to retire because he didn't want to coach his own kid. He wanted to watch his kid. So Coach Barnett comes up to me, and this is a person with 37 or 8 days sober, off of alcohol and crack cocaine and anything in between. And he says, hey, Parham, do you want to be the head freshman basketball coach for our high school? I was so terrified. But you know what?
I'll bet.
Absolutely. And now the most beautiful thing happened in my recovery, man. I was a part of something, and I had a bus full of kids that looked up at me, that depended on me, that counted on me to be there for them. And I coached that high school basketball team for 7 consecutive years, obviously staying clean and sober for it. One of the seasons we went 29-0. I'm proud of that season.
Jeez, yes.
I implemented all of Coach Wooden's pyramid of success in every single coaching thing that I ever did. And then after that, when life got a little bit better and I got my master's degree and I got my education, I wasn't able to coach full time anymore. So I became Coach Barnett's assistant coach. So the head varsity coach, I'm his second in command. And I bring in sports psychology. So I bring in mental health and youth sports. And I do it for free because I can. And I do it for free because the school can't afford it. And but I kind of piggyback off the Pete Carroll mental health kind of whole philosophy that they have up in Seattle. I do a small version of it at the Aliso Niguel High School. And this is my 5th season since there. So we're in season number 13, my friends.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 30 days after I got sober, man. And
Dude, that is awesome.
yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey. So the message to anybody watching this is when you replace the lifestyle, when you replace drugs and alcohol, when you replace addiction with something that gives you meaning, with something that gives you purpose, with something that gives you passion, it's a whole nother drug in itself, man. And I can get high on that stuff all day long with no consequences.
So true.
And I'm really proud of that. So that's the message I wanted to share. So anything else you want, my friend, I'm willing to talk about, discuss family dynamic, anything you want, man.
Man, that was so much, brother. But that's the thing, right? That's Addict to Athletes. That's our phrase, our call to arms. Erase and replace. If you erase something, you got to replace it with something of greater value.
100%.
You found that 30 days into your own recovery, and you're like, what? You want me to do this? I mean, how nervous were you to all of a sudden move from, hello, I'm Parham and I'm an addict, to hey, coach? Like, what? That to me is probably the coolest thing that could have happened to you, because you instinctively moved, like we call it, addict to athlete. You moved from addict to coach, and you're like, I'd much rather be doing this than anything else. So I'm gonna fake it until I become it.
Absolutely.
And I love it, man. That was a no-brainer for you, wasn't it? It's like, of course I'm going to do this, even though I'm scared of it.
You know, I think a part of me always wanted to have something that was more than the identity that I created in addiction. I just couldn't get it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have formal education. I didn't have any specific job training. And this was the first place that actually accepted me the way I was. And the coach was aware of what was going on with me, you know. There was one court case that I had to get, resolved with the court so I could pass the live scan for the school. So there were some hoops that I had to jump through while this was all happening. But
Yeah.
what happened was there was times that I had cravings. There was times that I, wanted to say, what, screw this, right? There was times that something happened in my outside life, but this always grounded me. I always came back to this and said, hey, these kids depend on me. Nobody ever depended on me, man. I mean, this is like a big deal for me. So, and just for today, I'm going to get by, and just for today, I'm going to get by. And when I stand in front of those banquets and I'm talking in front of all the families and this and that, and parents always come up to me afterwards and say, hey, I wish my kid grows up to be just like you. And I'm like, yo, there's a chapter in that life that I know you might not want your kid to grow up into.
There's a hard part in the middle there. Yep.
Yeah, there's a little story in there that I hope they don't have to go through. But I appreciate that. And so
it's incredible.
Yeah, sports is very healing and therapeutic for me. So that's why when I heard you guys' message, when you guys sat down in my office and talked to me when you were down in Huntington Beach, it resonated with me, man. Just every metaphor, every example, just the playbook, that's something as simple as that.
Yeah.
There's human beings that really need that simplicity, because I do believe that coaching at its purest form is very simple and relatable.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that, brother, because the thing that you said that stood out to me is that I needed to be part of a community. Yep. And that's, I think for Addict to Athlete, that's even bigger than what we do. It's that you now belong to something that's not that old way. It's no longer the negative, I guess, stigma of you're an addict. Now you're an athlete. Being part of something I didn't realize, and I use Eric Erickson's stages a lot through this. Sure. And so, getting back right before preteen and identity versus role confusion, you get stuck right there in this industry versus inferiority. And I love the fact here you feeling like you're coming over from Iran, and you're like feeling very smart, very confident, and overnight you are now in the back of the class because you don't know the culture, you don't know English, you don't know this stuff, and you're like, what is going on? And all of a sudden now your industry gets moved into that inferiority. And I see that so much with people coming into recovery where they feel inferior, not realizing that they've just endeavored in the biggest event in their life, which is recovery. And to find that key, that part of that community, that industry, I found that most of my athletes, once they realize that they walk in, they're like, well, I'm not an athlete, but I've heard your guys' groups are good. And as soon as they leave here, they're like, wait a minute, I think I can be an athlete. I think I am an athlete. And they become part of that team. How important is that community, that industry? How big is it? How big is it, for the folks you work with? Right down to how big was it for you? Because now you belong to a professional industry. Mental health therapy, family therapy. How important is that?
I think most people, and this is not just people that identify with, having an addiction problem, alcoholism problem. We have this phenomenon in our society that everybody is, I am not blank enough, right? I'm not smart enough. Yes. I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not fit enough, whatever it is. We all have this, which is inferiority. I mean, it's like low self-esteem. It's rooted in low self-esteem. And when that person who is not blank enough, for the first time, maybe in their entire life, belongs to something that accepts them exactly as they are. They accept them as who they are, the way they are. And not only do they accept them, they bring them in, which is, I know, something that you guys do, and they have them participate in something that is greater than themselves, right?
Yes.
By doing so, maybe one time 1 month, one time another month, one time another month, 4, 5, 6 months goes by, my friend, and all of a sudden that person who thinks they're not blank enough might feel like they're enough. They're enough the way they are. And those are the ones that you've seen all of a sudden become leaders who have never been a leader in their entire life or thought they could be a leader, are now in leadership roles because they finally found the value and the worth that they have. And it all happened because the industry, the connection, the community, the sense of identification, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, whatever, however you want to phrase it. And the thing that I like about it, by the way, with Addict to Athlete is something you touched on briefly when you were with me. You shared about the minor leagues, which is with the youngins, and you shared about the families that might not even have addiction problems. When that's the all-inclusivity that I love. When you bring in all people that are impacted and affected, and you have all people do something together in the same direction, right? So everyone's headed in the same direction, doing the same activity. That's where each step of the way healing happens. That's where transformation happens.
For sure. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to have you on here too, is because, you specializing in addiction and in marriage and family therapy, you definitely know angles and ways and situations by which, as you kind of just said, you had a rock bottom and your family had a rock bottom on how to build from that. Sure. And so share with me a little bit about what that transformation was like, because you saying your family's rock bottom, I don't even think of that as much as I probably should, because you're right. It's not just the person in the family that struggles, it hits. The whole family has to a certain degree. Those that don't, I think, kind of they miss the awakening. They miss that comeback, right? The comeback story. When a family heals like that together, how strong can that family become? Instead of just saying, well, it's your problem, you go fix it, we'll be here. What I've noticed is that when that happens and the person comes back in, they don't like the changes that person's made, because they're like, wait a minute, now first you're an addict, now you're coming back and you have all these opinions and these thoughts and you have all this, and I tell my athletes that sometimes. I'm like, your family has to go through this with you too. So how important is that community of family to this whole process?
Man. So let's just break that down real quick. When we're talking about an individual hitting bottom, we're usually referring to someone that has a substance abuse problem, drug and alcohol, behavior problem, gambling, or whatever you want to call it. And they hit an emotional, psychological, physical bottom. And they say, I cannot do this anymore. I can't live this way. And maybe they engage, maybe it's a legal problem, and they go in and they begin to take the steps to recover and change their life. However, if the family has yet to hit that same bottom, what happens is this perpetual cycle of enabling behavior continues. So what happens is the person comes back into the family system, and the family might continue to enable them even if they're clean and sober. And with that enabling is an inevitable relapse that's going to occur. Because what is enabling, by the way? Helping versus enabling, for anybody that wants to know and distinguish the two. Helping is doing something for someone that they can't do for themselves. Enabling is doing something for someone that they can and should do for themselves. So
can and should.
They could and they should. Yeah, I know. I'm cautious of using the word should, but there's certain things people in recovery should do for themselves.
I agree.
And as long as the family continues to do it for them, they not only cripple them, they disable their growth, they lead them right back into a relapse. So when a family hits bottom, they say, I'm no longer doing that. I'm no longer living this way. I'm no longer continuing that behavior. That's when, the boundaries 101 of addiction comes in. And by the way, when all this happens, it creates the ecosystem for recovery to happen. In that ecosystem of recovery, the individual who's getting clean and sober and the family members start to develop and establish, hopefully, a common language of recovery. So that disconnection that you see when someone gets clean and sober, they come in the family, what happens is they get a new language, but the family can't understand it. They keep missing each other. Right. They keep missing each other. So when the family learns that same language through the process of doing something together, learning about recovery, working on themselves, all of a sudden this new language of recovery happens in that ecosystem of recovery, and that's where family transformation happens. I think it's very hard and very difficult for an individual to go through the recovery process. It can be done. So I don't want to discourage anyone that it's happening to them. However, with the family there side by side, the support is so much more beautiful, and the destination is so much more beautiful.
I think so, because athletes, as part of talking about this, I want you guys to kind of put in your mindset some of the things we've talked about, establishing your home team, that home court advantage you establish in your home. What he's talking about is learning the plays, learning this new playbook. You guys are all coming from the same, I guess, league, but you've all been on different teams, and so now what he's saying is, how do you guys read this playbook together? What are the things that work, that don't work? What is the go to the tapes, watch the reels. What are you noticing? Who wasn't ready for the pass? Who was out of bounds? All these things. So what he's talking about is like what we describe as developing your home team, because isn't the key to have kind of this dynasty, this legacy of success, even though you're going to have wins and losses, at the end of the season, you want to have more W's than L's, right?
Absolutely.
In order to do that, everyone's got to play their part, and everyone's important. And there are no bench warmers on the family home team, wouldn't you say?
100%. I mean, everybody plays a part. And here's the thing, just like any other season, I always tell this, I'm a coach too, so I could really use this analogy right now.
Yes.
We were playing a game a couple weeks ago, and this is preseason, kind of, it's not league game, and it was like a Wednesday night, and we're playing against this team that's really, really good. And, I'm not too much for those kind of moral victory type things. However, I told the kids on the team that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, rarely are you guys going to remember the score of a game that happened on a random Wednesday night at home on a pre-league game. However, you will all remember the outcome of the entire season. What happened in league, what happened in your senior year, that kind of stuff like that. Recovery is the same way. There are a lot of interactions, communications, conversations that you may look back one day and not really remember them. However, they all need to be building towards victory. They all need to be building towards success. And sometimes you might have an interaction with someone, you're like, man, I dropped the ball there, or I overreacted there, or I avoided confrontation there, or I minimized something. I said I was doing fine when I really wasn't. That's okay once in a while, right? Because you're never going to look back, and that's not going to dictate everything. However, are you going to go back and say, hey, this is how I reacted, this is what I should have done? Or next time that the opportunity comes, am I going to share openly, honestly, and all that kind of stuff within the family system? Because if you do that, you're going to look back one day and have success in the family system.
Man, I love that. Yeah. That is so great. Listeners, I hope you're following this, because there's been a lot of times I've tried to articulate a little bit more about that family, home team. And as you were talking, I got thinking, wait a minute. I've always kind of constructed it in my head as if there was a coach, maybe a mom or dad. But I'm like, wait a minute. They need not be coaches and assistant coaches, directing the family. They need to be out there on the court too. And I never thought about it until you just said that like the coaches and the referees, those are outside things, right? I mean, from clergy, from police, all kinds of different people could coach you, but your home team, you guys are all playing together. There's no coaches, there's no bench warmers. You guys are now in play. I love that mindset for him. I think that's genius. But how hard is it for say someone like mom or dad who have been on the court a lot longer, now trying to trust that when I pass this ball, Junior here is going to take the shot, versus I don't trust Junior to take the shot. I'm going to pass it to somebody else, and I'm going to tell Junior, hey, you're not ready for this yet. And so Junior hangs back, right? These things have to kind of, I would imagine, kind of align trial and error with communication. How far does the breakdown of communication happen when everyone thinks they know, but no one's saying anything? No one's calling the plays, so to speak, right? Like, how hard is it for families to admit that, hey, that's my bad, that's my fault, or hey, I have faith in you, take the shot. If you miss it, we'll reevaluate. I mean, there's so many analogies
here.
This is great,
man.
I think.
Let me give this. I just love this one, because you ever watch those like Bad News Bears, or you watch those sport movies that like the kids, the first time they play with each other, they're just like horrible. There's no chemistry. No one knows what they're doing. No one knows where they're going. Kids are fighting with each other. When human beings get clean and sober, the family system is like that. Everyone just sucks at communicating. Everyone's just horrible. Yeah. People overreact. People underreact. People walk on eggshells. People, just they have a hard time with this dynamic. It's because they've never practiced healthy communication and recovery. And I'll tell you this: family members don't trust their loved ones that are getting clean and sober because of the evidence. You call it the real. You look back and it's like, oh, the highlights aren't that good. They're mostly low lights.
You remember this play of last year? Yeah.
However, I'll tell you this: that oftentimes we'll call them addicts, alcoholics. Normally I like calling them human beings that struggle with addictions at one point in their life, but for this sake of argument, we'll just call it addicts, alcoholics. Oftentimes they have lost trust in the family long before the family has lost trust in them. And I mean that. When a family member tells a kid, hey, I'll always be there for you, I'll always have your back, don't worry, you're never going to get hurt. And through the course of life, the family's not there for them. The kid does get hurt. the kid loses trust in their environment, their surroundings. So later on when they're getting clean and sober, just because they're clean and sober doesn't mean that they trust their family either. So there's a dual component here. It's not just the family member not trusting the addict because of their behavior. It's the addict alcoholic that's getting sober not trusting their family because potentially years of evidence that they have too. So in order for all this to work, everyone's got to put that aside. And the formula for trust is committed and consistent actions over time. The overtime part is the most...
Say that one more time. Our listeners, pay attention to this.
Say
that one more time,
brother. The formula for rebuilding
brother.
trust is committed and consistent actions over time. So the overtime part becomes so important, my friends, because here's why.
Yeah.
Some people say, hey, I tried it for 30 days. I did this for 60 days. I did that for 90 days. But they don't build the overtime part. The overtime part sometimes could be 9 months, a year, 18 months, 3 years. Are you willing to do committed and consistent actions over the course of 3 years to rebuild trust?
Gosh.
Some people are, most people aren't. But I'm telling you, without that last piece, trust will never get rebuilt.
Man, you are spot on with that. I was just talking, Marissa and I were talking about this just the other day about trust and about the longevity of it and how it's a gift. And when it's gifted to you, it can be taken back. You know, earning trust, I don't know, but gifting. But like, hey guys, I've been clean and sober now for 2-3 weeks now. I feel great. But they're like, yeah, but we have to be in that mindset that over time, and I've heard this once. I don't know how true it is, but I kind of think it's to a certain degree it stands truth. And that's for every week of addiction and bad behavior, a month of good behavior will start making up for that, which means there'll be time, it'll be years before 100% is back in that column. And so sometimes that's a lifetime, and that's okay because that natural progression of working up, building up to become that dynasty team, it's going to take some time. You're going to have some losses. I think that sometimes people get that, I don't know, the rose-colored glasses on. They don't realize that it's not always going to be dandelions and lilies. There's going to be problems. How are you going to adjust, right? I mean, how hard is it for families to see success within reach, but then get in such a downward spiral when something out of control happens or something that they didn't plan for? They get blindsided, like on the football field, right? Something blindsides you. All's not lost, is it? It's like, no, take a knee, regroup, and get back out there, right? When bad things happen, we don't fold. What do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, I always tell people to have the assumption that bad things are going to happen. And here's why. Because if you do so, that means you constantly are in a state of preparedness and preparation for yourself. I've told every family member I've ever worked for, I hope to God that your son or daughter never relapses. However, in the case that ever happens, what are you doing for yourself to stay psychologically and emotionally prepared to handle that crisis appropriately and responsibly when that time comes? Because if people aren't prepared for that and then they get blindsided, then they're really going to be in for a roller coaster because they're not going to, their whole world, their equilibrium is going to get turned upside down. However, if the family member works on themselves, right, works on their own emotions, works on their ability to handle crisis, if it happens, they're able to show up in that moment objectively with minimal emotions, to be able to reach out to their own support, to reach out to their own teammates, and to be able to get through even the hardest situations. And that's the beauty of family work, the importance of family work, actually, because recovery is not just for the individual getting clean and sober, it's for everybody, man. Addiction is a traumatizing process, man. Every mom and dad that's ever slept at night with a phone on their chest because they don't know if their kid's gonna live or die. Every mom or dad that's ever had to go to the courtroom or have to go bail out their kid because they just got arrested again. Every mom and dad that's ever, picked up their kid after a car accident and just put them in the car to kind of make sure they don't get in trouble. It's like this long, non-stop ride of trauma and overwhelming sensation that just destroys you. So when the individual is getting clean and sober, the family also has to recover from that long nightmare. They have to.
Yeah.
And that's why so many family members get sick. Psychosomatic illness. People, their immune systems get weak. Family members are having chronic fatigue. Family members are looking like they're the ones that went through the addiction.
Man, okay. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. And I love that. I love I can finally talk to someone like you, brother, who also knows that sports analogy kind of stuff. 'Cause I'm like, now I get to use all my stuff with him. So here's a situation. So there's a family that I know, and I'm not working with them, but I know of this family who had a real strong home team, right? But then one oldest son kind of went rogue, and he turned into a free agent, right? and he left the team, and he's young, and now he's posting pictures, of him smoking weed, and he's drinking, and he's probably doing stuff for this money that no one wants to get into. And this family on their home court sees this free agent son of theirs out running and gunning. What happens inevitably when it catches up to that kid and he's like, hey, I think I picked the wrong team. Can I come back? Sometimes family says, hey, you've made your bed, sleep in it. Other families say, you know what, there's still a spot for you. We need you on the court. What do you say to families like that where, be patient? They're seeing scary things, but that doesn't mean the game is over, right?
Yeah, the family in this case needs to be committed to the team that they're on, knowing that that's where they want to see their loved one playing playing with that team too. And they need to stay on that team by all means necessary themselves, regardless of what the loved one does or doesn't. And if and when, and the hope is always if and when, he comes around or she comes around and says, hey, I want to get back on the team with you guys, at that moment to truly accept that human being back with open arms, because they also believe that the right place for that person to be is on that team. However, you can't go and grab someone and pull them back on the team. It is impossible to make someone play in a team that they don't want to play in. So I always say, hey, just have a lot of compassion, have a lot of patience, and if and when the time comes, be ready. Be on the field, be ready, and embrace with open arms.
I love it. And to not be spiteful or angry, but to be like, hey, welcome back. Because you look at it in professional sports, like LeBron James leaving Cleveland, and everyone's like, oh, screw that guy. And then he comes back like, hey, man, welcome back. But I'm sure there was one or two guys that was like, what is he doing back here, But it's one of those things where it's like the same thing happens in the family, right? It's like there's always a spot here for you, but we're going to keep playing. We can't stop competing in life. We have to just keep moving. And I think teaching families, even the kids, when they see this lone wolf come back into the tribe, so to speak, it's like, got kids, you know what? Let's bring him back. It's such a dynamic. I can only imagine how hard that is for so many family systems where, they've been living in fear and anxiety for so long, and then when that person returns, if they do, that it's not a, well, now you have to compete and catch up with all of us instead of just saying like, hey, game on, grab your stuff. We're doing this. It's got to be hard not to have chips on your shoulders, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, one of the goals in life is to not to take things personal. It's nothing that people do is because of you or despite of you. It's because of their own world, their own reality. When someone leaves the team, sometimes they're not leaving because of you. They're leaving the team because they want to experience what X, Y, and Z is like out there. And once they do that experience, they might come back. And people really don't know what they have until it's gone. This has been around for thousands of years, and there's music about this. For example, when I left that basketball team and I started going to the streets and hanging out with guys I wouldn't hang out with and doing things I wouldn't have done. And I finally went back to the coach and I asked, hey, coach, can I just come sweep the floors? I remember walking in there and grabbing one of those brooms and just kind of smelling the air or just kind of looking at the lights or touching the wood with my hands. And at some point in my run, if I would have been in that same gym, it wouldn't have meant that much to me. But the teacher appears when the student's ready type stuff. And sometimes people aren't ready to be on the team, man. And that's okay. That's just where they are in that moment. And it's not a personal thing. It's just, hey, keep the doors open with open arms. And when they do show up, give them a jersey, give them a uniform, tell them where to be, and meet them there yourself,
But that's the thing, though, brothers. I'm curious about that. I'm making it a little personal with you again. What made you go back to Coach Barnett, though? Because did you have that kind of relationship before all this? And so you knew he would be someone that would at least shoot you right, steer you straight? Or did you go in kind of on a wing and a prayer? Because there must have been something that happened to you to trust this guy enough to say, yeah, man, I welcome back. Let's grab a broom.
So I was the captain of the varsity team. That was one thing, So we had a good relationship. He was kind of like a father figure to me, if you will. But through the recovery programs and going to treatment, they told me to go do community service and go volunteer somewhere. So that's what they told me. They just told me to go do something, be of service to others, and kind of get out of your own head. So I just thought the first place I would rather do that. I really didn't want to go do too many volunteer community service things at the time. I was still selfish and self-centered. I figured if I have to do something for free, I might as well go do something with basketball. So
might as well enjoy it.
I might as well enjoy it. So there was a risk associated to that. I didn't know if he was gonna, even allow me to or want me to, and if not, that would have been okay. But I kind of just shot my shot, if you will, and you miss all the shots you don't take. So I shot it.
It's so amazing.
Yeah, it banked in, and that's okay. That's good enough.
So it's like having enough trust in the whole process to know that, like, if you go there with an open heart, open mind, you never know what's gonna come. You could have talked yourself out of that on the way over, like, man, he's not gonna want to see me, or you know what, man, maybe this isn't what I want. But you didn't. You followed through. So my next question is, so then after this, what moved you to want to get into counseling and therapy? Like, what was it that put you in that mindset? Because, man, I still feel like I cheated or somehow suckered them out of a diploma because I sucked at school, man. I dropped out. I had to go back to adult high. Yeah. And so I still feel kind of like, did I really do the work? I mean, I got the diploma and I have the gray hair now to prove I did it. But, like, what made you take that next leap? Because you could have went in and just thought, well, this is my passion. I'll coach and maybe I'll go in here. But you took a whole nother degree. You went into the thick of things, man. You jumped right into the fire with this.
Yeah, and I do want to qualify myself there, just like you did. I was not a good student by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, man.
And when I dropped out of school when I was 18 years old after I did get my diploma from the same high school, but I didn't go back to school till I was 25. So I had a few community college units and a bunch of withdrawals and Fs and stuff like that. So I didn't have academia, but the reason I am a drug and alcohol counselor and a licensed clinician, kind of like yourself, the counselor that I had in rehab, it was the first time in my life that I experienced what it's like for someone to hear my story, not judge it, not shame it, accept it exactly the way it was, and make me feel okay with all the things that I have done and who I'd become. And it was just such a freeing feeling for me, man. I tell you, I'll never forget it. When I left his office that day, and by the way, this is a twist, this interesting twist. It was June 12th, 2008. I went to his office to go to his rehab. He told me to come check into the rehab center. I said, hey, I gotta go. I can't come in today because, addicts, alcoholics were the busiest people in the world with nothing to do. And so I left, and I actually ended up overdosing that night. So I ended up at Hoag Hospital with a drug overdose, and there was the Oxycontin 80s at the time with some Xanax and Klonopin and that whole world. And the next day, safe to say, I checked into his rehab. But I promised myself that I would make another human being feel the way that guy made me feel, right? So that was that's my whole essence of this stuff. It's this guy's phenomenal. Man. And 60 days into it, I got out of residential care. I'm in his outpatient program. I go to Saddleback Community College and I say I want to be a drug and alcohol counselor. And I'm telling you, I wasn't a school guy, but I just wanted to be like this guy. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you got this star athlete that you just go in the backyard and you shoot like and you act like and you talk like and you walk like and you dress like. This guy did that to me. Up until that moment, my role models in life were like Al Pacino and Scarface, Robert De Niro and Goodfellas, Johnny Depp and Blow. Like, that's who I looked up to.
That was you. Yeah.
And then I met this guy and I'm like, man, I want what this guy has. I want to do what he does. And so I go to community college and there's a 37 unit. It's a 1.5-year program. I was able to get some grants because I didn't have that much money. I was able to, get some, free community college education that we have, or low cost. And I got my drug and alcohol counseling certificate, and once I got that, I was able to work in the field as a DUI counselor. I worked at a court-ordered DUI place as doing groups and individuals for people that did not want to be there. I have 15 people that just got a DUI, and the last person they want to see is me. They associate me to the
type.
Yeah. They associate me to the cop that pulled them over and the judge that sentenced them, and I had nothing to do with any of them. But that really taught me how to be a good counselor, because if you deal with a group with 15 people that don't want to be there and you have to facilitate a group, you get really, really good after a while. So
I love it.
And then I just kept going forward with school, man, because I wanted more. I realized that maybe I'm not stupid enough, or blank enough, all that enoughs. I realized that, hey, maybe I can finish school. Maybe I am worthy of better things in life. Maybe I can become self-sufficient in life. And I got my bachelor's in human services. And ultimately led to getting my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. But if you rewind the tape back to the guy that was stealing his mom's jewelry and forging his grandma's check to go buy some cocaine, and to this version of me right now, it's nothing short of a miracle. But the beauty of the U.S. and America is the fact that we all root for the underdog, if you will, and it's true. It's one of those stories that the underdog came above. And my whole life mission right now is just to help another person have that feeling that I had in that guy's office. That's what I wake up for every day.
That's the coolest thing, man, because the first time I sat down in therapy, I walked out of the guy's office. I gave him the "good day, sir," and shut the door because I'm like, this guy's an idiot.
Sure.
And he had the audacity to tell me that I didn't know who I was, right? And I'm like, it's a rhetorical question. No one can answer that. And I left his office thinking he was the biggest fraud known to man. And I came back, I was dating Marissa at the time. I told her I graduated therapy. I'm like, I'm done. One session, one and done. And she's like, what? And so we talked about it a little bit, and I told her, yeah, he asked me about this, who am I? And she's like, I can tell you who I am. I'm like, oh yeah, really? Prove it. And she did. And that freaked me out because I'm like, wait a minute, we're the same age. You have a foundation, you know who you are, and I really don't. So I had to go back and apologize to my therapist. And man, we got into the thick of things, and it's the same concept, man. Like it's funny how similar our stories are, brother, because same thing. I thought, well, if I've gone this far, I'm the first one to ever graduate high school in my family, let alone go to college. No one's ever done that. And so I still feel like there's times when I'm like, okay, did I really do that? But it wasn't easy, but I had the same thing you did. I wanted to give someone else a shot if they believed enough in themselves to ask for help. And I think that's incredible. But marriage and family, that's an interesting path. I mean, why that and not social work or sports psychology? What drew you to wanting to help family systems heal?
Probably my own story, to be honest with you. I know that sounds the cop-out answer, but it was really just
not at all.
Yeah, just watching. Addiction was a big part of my family system. My relationship with my father, his relationship with my mother. Just the impact that upbringing had on my psychosocial development. And then that being the catalyst to years and years and years of just unhealthy family systems. When we finally got the family together and we started healing together. And my parents, by the way, to this day, they attend the multi-family group every Wednesday from 6 to 10 p.m. at the same rehab that I went through 13 years later. You know what I mean? Like,
that's incredible.
Yeah. So it's,
oh my gosh.
So, but when I started seeing the improvements with my relationship with my father, his relationship with my mother, all those dynamics changed. I realized that without the family piece, the recovery piece wouldn't have been the same, and that's the premise of my work with people is like, hey, we have to address this family at some point. I mean, I understand you want to focus on yourself for a little bit, and that's okay. However, you're focusing on yourself to develop the muscles, if you will, to be able to have those conversations with mom, with dad, with spouse, with your kids that you've been avoiding since you were a child.
For sure.
The goal is to get into those roots and those weeds and to be able to heal that, because chances are they have a lot of things that they need to say, and what's not said is what's not expressed does not exist. So let's take the unknown into the known, and let's see what we can do about it and build something strong, build a foundation. So I believe that it's all family systems. It's a very important element of it. So, social work I thought about, psychology I thought about. I just landed on family therapy. Even though personally I don't do too much family therapy right now, I got a team of clinicians that do family therapy. Yeah. So I kind of manage them. I manage my team, if you will. But it's the same framework. It's the same foundation.
For sure.
The walls.
But that's what blows my mind, though, is like your parents very much involved in their own healing process, which helped you get to where you were. They still give back. Man, that is foreign to me, because I don't think my mom even knows what I do for a living. I really don't think she does. Her and I, she got married when she was 14 years old, and so she was just a kid having kids, and so much abuse and the cycles that happened. It was crazy because hearing that, it just makes me so happy, because it's proof of what can happen when parents realize that they're not the problem, but they have stewardship in it. And I think that happens sometimes. How many times have you had family sessions where the parents are just waiting for the therapist to attack them because they must have done something so horribly wrong to get their kid into a situation of addiction? And it's like, no, everyone has their stuff, and although you didn't create this, you do have stewardship in it, but everyone takes their own accountability. I still feel like that's one of the biggest roadblocks to get family help, is that they're afraid that they're going to be blamed or stigmatized for the problem, meaning, you created this. And then, again, stewardship in, not cause of. What do you think of that?
I love that,
statement?
man. Stewardship in, it's have some type of ownership or buy-in. But here's the thing. I think a lot of families that haven't done their own work, right, that have an underlying sense of guilt because of something that happened in life. I see this all the time with like families that, maybe the mom and dad got a bad divorce when they're younger, and there's so much guilt in how that impacted the kid that the mom or dad continues to enable the loved one. So they feel like at some point they were the cause of it. So they try to avoid going into a family therapy session, because just in case the 1% that the therapist validates what they already think, all of a sudden it becomes real to them. So they kind of avoid that, when the true matter of the fact is no one really causes it, man. All this stuff is multi-generational. I always, whenever I talk to someone that's talking about their mom or dad, I have them talk about their mom and dad's family, and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey, just talk about your grandma, talk about your grandpa, talk about your aunts, your uncles, talk about them. And as soon as they do, they're like, oh, wait, maybe my mom or dad is the way they are because of all that, and all of a sudden it becomes multi-generational, which creates the opening for the greatest conversation ever, is, do you want to be the one that breaks the cycle?
Oh my gosh, brother, you're giving me cold chills, because you just said everything that happened with me. And that's the exact same thing. Is I couldn't blame my mom after a certain point. Not the greatest example. In fact, her and I don't even have a relationship. It's been that stressed. But I know now where it came from. I mean, someone that needs to leave a family at age 14 to embark on their own couldn't have had a great childhood. And through peeling back those layers, I discovered it. I found a grandmother who was non-emotional, was very emotionally abusive and hands-off and addicted. And I had no idea about that until you start pulling back layers. You're right, it's multi-generational. And so in order to break the cycle, right, like you just said, you've got to do something completely different. It blows my mind that your parents were willing to take that journey with you. Was that because they felt it? Or was it by invitation, or was it just the natural flow of what happened? Because that to me is amazing.
The same counselor was very big on the importance of this, and he really drove home to the fact that if you want your kid to succeed, that you guys have to engage in this recovery stuff yourself. My dad was more hesitant or reserved or not all in, if you will, for the first probably 5 or 6 months of it, because he kind of just said, hey, just fix them. This is just out of sight, out of mind type stuff. My mom understood there was something here going on, so she attended a lot of the support groups and read the literature and did all that kind of stuff. But eventually, the same way that for some of us, it clicks that, hey, I'm doing this for myself. There's a lot of people that come into the various rooms of support groups saying, hey, I'm here because of the courts, I'm here because of my wife, I'm here because of my kids, I'm here because of X, Y, and Z. And somewhere along the line, they're like, you know what? Maybe I came in for them, but I'm staying here because of myself. And I think that happened to my mom and dad, that they realized like there was multi-generational patterns of themselves and their lives and unhealthy ways of coping that they're starting to address and look at, and it's helping them become more healthy. My dad stopped smoking cigarettes after like 50 years of smoking cigarettes because of this whole stuff,
Wow.
And he would have never done that on his own, it's and they started building a community for themselves, because addiction, by the way, for the families is very, very isolated. Family members stop telling other people what's going on. They feel ashamed. They feel like they have to lie and minimize and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of shame associated to it. So when they get to hang out with other family members that have gone through the same thing, and they can have conversations about what it was like to enable their loved one for the 17th time and go through the insanity of it, and have someone understand, it heals them too. So they started healing, I think, and they realized it themselves. Hence why 13 years later they're still going.
I think that's amazing, brother. That blows my mind, and it makes a lot of sense, because just hearing the way that you talk about your family and the way that you hold yourself, I can feel that it wasn't just a you changing, that it was everybody put in their work. That that's kind of rare, man. And I hope that listeners, I hope you understand that if you have a family member that's struggling, it's not just to stay at bay because you're worried about, maybe saying something or doing something. It's getting actively engaged and being a part of the process, and, maybe even finding your own stuff. See, that was one thing that we did differently on Team Addict II Athlete that 10 years ago, like I said, when we started, we caught some flack for, and that was we didn't distinguish addicts from non-addicts. We decided to bring everybody in. So it wasn't like a 12-step community where we had Al-Anon and everything else. We brought everybody together so that the families could learn from the person in addiction, the addiction could learn about the family members. And we have people that have never used substances come, because I found out that, guess what? Everyone goes through the same stuff. Some people just use different tools to suppress it. Me, I chose substance use to get rid of my emotional pain. My wife, Marissa, she's never done a drug or anything in her whole life, but she took that frustration out in the pool. She was a competitive swimmer. So I thought, wait a minute, you've never had substances, but you've had feelings. How did you do that? And she's like, we just dealt with them. And so just to normalize it to the point where everybody's got something. Let's not pretend like mine's worse or better than yours, and to get in together for that positive direction of turning the mess into the message. How have you seen family systems when they catch that flow, everyone owning their own, everyone knowing their position? What ultimately happens? I mean, because again, right, chance for relapse is there, but the family knows more. They understand that, like, okay, reset, call back in, huddle, group. I remember when I was coaching basketball, we'd have everybody huddle, and we wouldn't talk about the play. We'd be like, dude, you doing okay?
Yeah.
You seem a little bit out of sorts. How important is it for families to do that group huddle, to talk about things instead of just waiting for a play to go wrong?
The more you practice this way of life, right? The more you practice playing these different plays on this team, the more you start to get competent, and the more you start to get confident, and the more you start to feel capable of your skills, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to it. So when life happens, and by the way, inevitably it happens to all of us, when shit hits the fan, you're able to navigate through the crisis, through the situation. It's kind of like when a team goes on an 8-0 run, right? Some teams get completely flustered and the crowd's going nuts and they're getting flustered and they're yelling at each other and screaming at each other. Some teams huddle up together and say, hey, it's just 8 points. Let's calm down. Let's get the next 2 points. Let's play together. And the only way you can get to that mindset and that poise is through repetition and practice and working on that recovery stuff. So family members can get to that. You know, the serenity in the midst of chaos is what I like to call it. You can get to that serenity in the midst of chaos, but you got to really work for it. It's not a free feeling that anyone can experience.
I love the fact that you keep using that word practice, because most people think, well, practice makes perfect, but it doesn't, right? Practice makes permanent, meaning like the more you practice, the more permanent your outcome is going to be. I don't think we're ever going to be perfect, but we'll have some permanency there, and we'll know how to handle it when we do get kind of caught in a little bit of a run and we're not scoring as much. Bart, I love the fact that you get this. That's one of the reasons why when Marissa and I first heard you, I'm like, I've got to get him on, because you worked so well with Dr. B, and talking to Dr. B was like electricity for me. I'm like, this guy's got it. You have the same thing, man. You broke me out in cold chills and everything. I'm curious, as this hour goes by so flipping fast, what do you say to that kid that's in your shoes, that when he rolls up asking someone for a little bit of help or maybe even a little bit of belief, why give them the nod? Why give them a job? Why give them that sense of belonging, when really is this because it wasn't Coach Barnett's job to get you there, but he did. He must have felt and saw something in you. What do we do when we're in that situation where someone rolls up and says, hey, can I be a part of this?
Yeah, I think instead of saying why, the main question should be why not? Why not give somebody a chance? It's I don't have a good answer for that, because I believe that all people deserve it. I mean, I'd be a hypocrite as someone, as an immigrant in this country that has been blessed and given multiple different opportunities, to not give a chance to somebody. Besides, it's who are we, to dictate if someone may or may not make it. Some of the best advice I can give to a counselor or someone that is working in the field or anything like that, I always say, hey, be careful for taking too much credit for the success of those who you work with, because if you do, then by default, you got to give just as much credit to yourself for the ones that don't make it, right? So what we got to do is just stay consistent, give everybody a fair and honest chance. It's making an all-inclusive environment, be welcoming, and motivate people, high-five people, pat them on the back, acknowledge it's the smallest little achievement they do. Make sure that they know about it. And if they continue to want to be on the team, keep having them come back. If they don't, let them know it's always available. If someone's on the team, this is some good advice. If you're on Coach Blu's team and you're thinking about getting drunk or loaded, just remember this. It's always better to be on the team thinking about getting drunk and loaded than it is to be drunk and loaded wishing you were back on the team.
Man, I wish I'd known that 10 years ago. That's freaking genius, man. You're absolutely right. That's spot on. Brother, you know how we operate just by everything you've done. I love that. Listeners, take this into consideration. Get this to the folks that need it. Parham's been talking the truth this whole time. Brother, what's the best way people can find out what you're doing? I know you and Dr. B do a weekly show and stuff. What's the best way people can find out more about what you got going?
A couple things. The name of my company is Buckeye Recovery Network. So if you go to BuckeyeRecoverynetwork.com, It's a mental health, behavioral health, intensive outpatient facility in Huntington Beach, California. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me as under the 1 Minute Therapist. Check me out there. It's brand new. I started it in January. I'm just having fun, man. I'm always available every Sunday at 1:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Myself and Dr. B, we do a live for 2 hours that anyone can come and ask questions. It's all for free and for fun. So I'm available. I'd love to connect with anybody who wants to connect, and I'll always do my best.
Yeah, and listeners, Parham and Dr. B, they do that show every Sunday. It's good content. It is not just like back and forth. It's legit content. Like I love it. And your Minute Therapist, I'm like, Marissa, I gotta start doing this because I love it, man. You are spot on with that. So listeners, go follow that. And again, you guys have been well fed. I think that Parham, this won't be the last time you're on the podcast. I know it already because I have 1,000,005 other questions, brother. But thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. I appreciate that. Athletes, as you guys move forward, remember to give thanks to everyone in your life, those people that can inspire you to become something greater, because you never know what's going to be taught and who's going to be able to help you. Those burnt bridges can be rebuilt. I want to thank Radio Ronin Network for having a Addict II Athlete on their podcasting network. Thank you guys so much. Go check out the other podcasts on Radio Ronin. And athletes, until next time, go turn that mess into a message.